In 1963, the Americans were pressing Israel to inspect Israel's Dimona nuclear facility for nuclear weapons development capability. The Israelis stalled the Americans at every turn to conduct verification inspections. The Israelis refused. On June 15, 1963, Kennedy finally threatened to cut off relations with Israel and leave the Jews open to attack by Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. This is the recently declassified threat. On June 15, 1963, at 1:55 p.m., the Israeli Prime Minister, Ben-Gurion, received an urgent telegram letter from President Kennedy. This is the recently declassified letter never before shown in this form. The letter contained an existential threat to cut off Israel from its special relationship with the United States. This letter led to Kennedy's death sentence. In part, Kennedy wrote,
Washington's commitment to and support of Israel could be seriously jeopardized if it was thought that the U.S. government could not obtain reliable information on the Dimona reactor and Israel's nuclear intentions.
Kennedy further wrote, to push home his ultimatum to cut off Israel,
you fully appreciate the truly vital significance of this matter to the future well-being of Israel.
President Nasser of Egypt was pressing Kennedy over Dimona and threatening to bring in the Soviets into the region. Kennedy was extremely alarmed, as 8 months before, between October 16 and 29, 1962, the Americans and Soviets had come close to a nuclear exchange with the Cuban Missile Crisis. Kennedy's threat to cut off Israel could have led to a nuclear-armed Egypt and wider Middle East. Prime Minister Ben-Gurion resigned the next day on June 16, 1963, to buy time until something could be done about Kennedy for existentially threatening Israel by leaving it open to Arab attack and/or denying Israel the ability to develop nuclear weapons, which is what Dimona was really about. Ben-Gurion was using the Holocaust as the reason why Israel needed to be nuclear-armed. Kennedy wasn't buying it. This infuriated Ben-Gurion. After Ben-Gurion resigned, the new Prime Minister Levi Eshkol was equally pressed by Kennedy for Dimona inspections. Ben-Gurion's resignation had bought Israel a little time until something could be done about Kennedy. For good. Ben-Gurion set up Mossad in 1949. Assassinations is its specialty. On September 16, 1963, the Americans were tricked into believing they were given an inspection of Dimona. Kennedy was pressing hard for the Dimona inspection after Ben-Gurion resigned on June 16th. His resignation wasn't made public until 10 days later on June 26th. During this time, Ben-Gurion had ordered Israel's Mossad to assassinate Kennedy. 2 U.S. nuclear inspectors were sent to Israel by Kennedy to inspect Dimona. They were stalled while in Israel. They were given the runaround by the Israelis. This is a recently declassified report as to what happened in Israel during the inspection, which didn't happen. The inspectors were given a tour of the resort town of Eilat on the Dead Sea instead of given access to inspect Dimona, which is why they were in Israel. This is despite the fact that one has to pass Dimona to reach Eilat. This Dead Sea visit was the day before the 2 American inspectors were due to return to America. On the way back from Eilat, the Israelis offered to stop at Dimona for an unofficial visit to say hello to the Dimona director, who, conveniently, proved not to be there. The Americans were given a brief 45-minute guided tour of Dimona. They didn't choose what they saw or where they went. They didn't enter many buildings or sensitive areas. They were told this was just a quick courtesy call to say hello. They were later told this qualified as their inspection. They objected. The Israelis said they'd had their inspection tour to satisfy their mission. In any event, they assured the Americans there was nothing to see at Dimona. They had fulfilled their mission. They'd had their inspection of Dimona and they should go home. It was a bait and switch on the Americans. A Jewish trick. Upon complaint, the Americans were offered a revisit of Dimona, but with all the previous stalling, time had run out for the two Americans. They were due to leave the next day. The two foolish American inspectors couldn't see they'd been lured into a trap by the Elliott deception and diversion. The two Americans went back to America and reported all good at Dimona. Kennedy was furious at the two American incompetent inspectors. He was angry at the Israeli trick. Kennedy now had mere weeks to live. Mossad would assassinate Kennedy on November 22, 1963. The Israelis had bought time to kill Kennedy directing the CIA, who Kennedy had threatened to break into 1,000 pieces. The newly installed U.S. president and Israeli asset, President Lyndon Johnson, would not press Israel over Dimona, as Kennedy had done. Nor would he threaten Israel existentially, as Kennedy also had done. President Johnson was Israel's man. The USS Liberty affair later proved it. Israel killed 73 American servicemen and wounded 171. There was a coup in Dallas on November 22, 1963, when Kennedy was assassinated. America has had a shadow Zionist government ever since. In 1998, Yuval Ne'eman, who had orchestrated the Elliott deception,